Well, hello. Welcome to the Eddie Conversation podcast. My name is Eddie Vigil, and I am your host. Um, I am a filmmaker living in Los Angeles, California, and joining me today is another filmmaker, director, Joe Miale.
Hi.
Hello. Hey.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks for being a part of the chat. Been trying to, I'm always reaching out with little we know each other primarily. We met on, I think we somehow followed each other on Instagram at a point. And we can dive into a little bit of that too, but you are, like I said, a film director. When you talk to people and are introducing yourself to somebody who has no idea what you do, how do you normally describe yourself these days?
Well, I don't talk to people. That's how I get away with that. No, I tell them I'm an imposter, and then I run away screaming. I'm a writer-director. That's what I've always wanted to do. That's what I do, and that's who I am.
Writer-director, making movies. Cool.
Right.
All right. So I know I'm going to skip what I was just going to say and jump right into question number one.
Sure.
Okay. Or no, okay. I'm going to do a little bit of foundation building here on just our dynamic and how I look at you. I know that I moved to LA in 2018. I was trying to make my first movie in 2019. I had met up with you. We met up for coffee back in the pre-days when that was a thing people did. And and I got advice from you on making my first feature film and whatnot. And I really took a lot of what you said to heart, and I appreciated your approach. And you said really nice things in terms of, like, I remember specifically, I was kind of talking down some of my previous experience, or maybe like that was the budget I was working with, and you're kind of like, dude, like, you're making a movie, chill, like it's awesome, like, like, think highly of the thing you're doing versus the talking down version. And I know, like, I took that home very much so, and I try to relay that message to other filmmakers too. So a movie that you had made, which I had the pleasure of watching recently, is called Revolt. That I believe was your directorial feature debut, right? Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, that released in 2017. And okay, I know I have specific questions on. I don't know exactly where to start when talking about the movie. Like, I know, but I guess for those that are unfamiliar, how could you give us some foundation on maybe what the movie's about, and then I can jump into.
Oh yeah, absolutely, sure. Revolt is a science fiction action film. It's an independent original film that I wrote. It stars Lee Pace and Berenice Marlowe. And Lee Pace plays an American soldier who wakes up in a jail cell in Kenya with no memory and doesn't even remember he's a soldier, and quickly discovers he's in the midst of the end of the world, sort of a War of the Worlds level alien invasion. And the story is really his journey across the war zone to find his place in the battle, if you will, and to really figure out who he is. And without spoiling anything, his journey leads him to realize it doesn't necessarily matter who he was, that he's going to redefine himself in the future of this battle. And so there's some, fairly subtle metaphors and meanings in there, but on the surface, it's a hopefully fun action sci-fi romp with some original alien designs and other cool things. And it's a small movie. We packed as much spectacle as we could into it. It was about a $3 million movie. It's got a lot of action sequences, hundreds of effect shots, cool spectacles, interesting stuff, and hopefully some good drama as well.
Yes. Amazing. Yeah, no, that's the great job with that. Love it.
I haven't thought about the movie in a minute, so it took me a second to dust off some of the memories of what the movie is, but that's it.
Yeah, because I know when I watched it, because I know that it's been a bit since that was a thing, and I'm sure you've been up to plenty. You're doing. I know you're setting up to do plenty of stuff and all that kind of stuff. But going back to this one,
Mhm.
how I know I was paying attention to 'cause like you said, it's a small movie, but it's very expansive in ways. Like I'm thinking about the location specifically. Like I know
Mhm.
when I was watching it, you talk about it as if it's a small movie. But what and then in my mind when I'm watching, I'm like, oh my gosh, the characters are covering so much terrain
Right.
in
Right.
this project, and there's I don't know how
How
does that work?
how did we do that?
How
Is that
did
what
you
you're
do
asking
that?
me?
Yeah,
It's
that's
okay. So let's reframe Revolt. Revolt is a small, big movie. It's a sci-fi adventure that should not have been made possible to exist, and it took a lot of blood, sweat, and figuring out, and a lot of really hard work and dedication from so many people to do something that at the time uh, seemed it was just the right moment to do it, which is, can we take all the latest tools of filmmaking and all the sort of, I don't know, clever figuring we can, and make a really small action film feel like a big action film. That was kind of the goal.
mhm.
So just as an example, you mentioned the locations.
Yeah.
The script is sort of a road movie. It's two people going across a destroyed or a crumbling world and encountering different, troubles and trials along the way. Some of those locations I deliberately kept fairly open and vague in the script. It might be a scene that takes place on at an intersection. Didn't really specify more than what that intersection meant. I like the symbolism of a crossroads, but beyond that, and in pre-production, we would just scout tons of locations, and I would have them bring back, like, every location that they had recently filmed at that was, a place we could actually film that they thought was interesting. And I would try to see if I could sort of back some of the scenes into those locations. So instead of being really fixed and saying like this scene has to take place, at a stone bridge over a river with a tree right here, and then you're trying to find exactly that. It was more like, just bring me all those bridges you've ever filmed at, and let's see if one of those can work. Because it wasn't built into the script, it wasn't so inherent. A lot of films do that, but we really went for that. And so so many scenes were made larger because we were open to finding out what we could find, like finding places that maybe didn't need
Mhm.
a budget to make them work. We'd go to like an abandoned we filmed in Johannesburg, and around Johannesburg, and that city was kind of founded on these gold mines, many of which are now depleted and more or less abandoned. So there's lots of abandoned older buildings that have crumbled, and just sort of infrastructure that's decayed. And so we used a lot of that, but didn't want it to seem like it had been there a long time. So we'd find a crumbling building and maybe put a fire next to it and a smoke machine next to it and stage a scene in front of it. So at least maybe a keen eye would realize what we were doing, but at least it gave you the atmosphere that they're walking through sort of a destroyed world. As opposed to, if you were making a really big budget film, you would probably create that entire set for that sequence, and it
Mhm.
would cost a lot of money and take a long time. And we kind of found those sets and built the movie into them.
Yeah, which I thought you guys did an awesome job with like because I'm like, oh, it's not just I could imagine the indie guerrilla filmmaker type where you kind of just go off into the desert and you're like, all right,
Yeah.
actors, get out there and make it make it look apocalyptic with your acting.
Well,
Um,
it's no different though than what I've often heard, like the Duplass brothers talk about, and or anyone who's like, well, I've got a cool house that I live in
yeah.
that I think can work, and I'm going to shoot a scene here. It's just the more uh, it maybe more elaborate version of that same idea. Because if you go to a different country that isn't captured on film that often, I mean, many films are filmed in South Africa, but very often they're filming in South Africa as if it's Seattle or something. They're just using the country as a foundation. But we were actually filming in South Africa, and for a film that we were setting in Kenya. So we wanted sort of the more regional look and feel, and the red soil and the roads and all of that. So if you go to another country to shoot your film, and instead of trying to force your ideas upon the country, if you look for what that countryside and what that crew has to offer you, you find a way to, reverse engineer the puzzle and maybe make something a little bigger than it deserves to be in
Yeah,
terms of the budget.
for sure. I dig it. In terms of the story,
Yeah.
okay. Um, one thing that I really dug about it too was how you handled the two leads, the road story, like you said. It's a trip between these two characters, one guy who doesn't know who he is, and then the gal um are traveling across and trying to they're doing their thing and trying to survive. And um I don't really want to spoil. I don't know. We can I don't know. It's whatever. How did I really dug the geez, I want to talk about the ending, but uh
Well, I don't
just
know. It's probably
I'm
safe to talk about at this point.
I'm just saying, like, I like how y- it wasn't you weren't screaming at the camera like, oh, these two are gonna fall in love at some point or whatever, like,
Hmm.
oh, there's a thing here. And it kind of like naturally came up in this moment of just high intensity, and they just end up in each other's arms kind of haphazardly, and there's like just we're dying looking at each other's eyes kind of thing. And
Yeah.
it that kind of came out of nowhere and surprised me because I thought that was a direction you weren't going to go with it. um so I'm like, oh, it seems like it's playing very platonically, and I dig it. I'm like, that's a different thing. I much prefer to see this play out. And then it still came in as a surprise, and then it got ripped away from us right away too. So
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool, and I don't know if there's anything specific that you, as to why you approached that way, or I don't know.
Yeah, that wasn't the original ending. Um, the script and the film, and between script revisions and production and editorial and some reshoots, there were quite a few endings to the film. And and especially
Sure.
for a smaller film, it was actually quite a great opportunity that the producers enabled us to go back and shoot
Mm.
more footage and create that new ending. So that moment in the film was kind of a pivot point to a reshoot. So that wasn't the way the story ended initially, or the story turned initially. Um, but the original ending didn't quite work, and that was a solution that I think gives the film an intensity and a twist that it needs. So that it's not so
Hmm.
expected that, oh well, if this male and female character survive at the end of the movie, they're going to kiss. Like it's kind of been done quite a few times. So this was a way to do something a little more surprising, and it also refocuses the story on the lead character, Bo, Lee's
Hmm.
character, because it's really his story of his identity. And so the interesting thing to me dramatically was, for the first hour of the movie, he's trying to figure out who he is, and he starts to maybe learn a little bit about himself by his interactions with her, and starts seeing the world the way she sees the world because he's really so confused and lost. And then just when he starts getting sort of anchored in her a little bit, she's taken away, and now he's forced to reckon with, the one person in the world he knew at this point.
Yeah.
And who are you when that happens? And also the interesting idea that, she knew lots of she's quite a frustrated character because she's known so much loss, and he's almost ignorant to the loss, because without a memory he doesn't even know the people that he lost. And so it was a way for us to give this character a sense of loss
Hmm.
later in the film, and force him to kind of rebuild his identity around that. And of course, the film, not only does she get taken from him, but then he learns in a complex way, he learns who he really is and has to decide what to do with that. And without spoiling too much, I'll say, he learns that he is uh, um, maybe a bit on both sides of this invasion, and it could kind of go either way for him, and he has to make a choice of what to do with that. Which side is he going to take
Yeah.
in this fight? So it was a way to force that character to reckon with that.
Yeah. No, most definitely. That makes sense. So how, I guess, like, I'm curious on the process of shooting and ending and then going into post with it. And then, because, like, let's just say for me, I've directed such, oh, geez Louise, I was gonna do it again. I was gonna say such small things. I haven't had the
Well,
luxury
that's
of,
okay.
or
They could be small things. It's
no, it's
not
good.
a.
It's,
It's
I guess, like,
fine.
I just,
Yeah.
going in and it sounds like an exciting process to me. Is I guess what I'm trying to say is you shoot a thing, put it together, you watch it. Who and how uh, do those decisions come about? I guess in your specific case, like, who are you talking with, and how did
Mm.
you decide on what you wanted to, how you're going to mix it up and go back and adjust that ending and such?
It involves many long nights and a lot of agony, quite honestly, because you're in an editing room with your editor,
Hmm.
and in the first sort of chunk of time, you get to do your director's cut. So really, no one else is involved, and it's just kind of like the purest version of what you think you've got. And it's you and the editor, and maybe you've shown some friends or had some conversations, but you've kind of been very insulated. And then you start, and then that period ends, and then the producers have a look, and then you start having some really serious conversations, not just about the ending, but just about the whole movie. Like, what do we have? We wrote something, we shot something, but now what do we have? And it's a reflection of the edit, but also just a reflection of the edit at that point, but also just a reflection of the material you've captured. So that's a chance where that's when we start to realize, oh, well, some of these like you've said, some of these locations have really, and what we did with them really worked out. Look how
Hmm.
expansive this section of the film is, or look how exciting this little action sequence we shot in 2 days. It's massive. Like, we really, okay. And then maybe we'll edit it more and add more to it. And then it becomes a visual effects conversation, because you're cutting with temporary effects or just little placeholders. So it's hard sometimes to really appreciate the power of a scene when it relies on effects and they're not in. So you start getting some effects and putting them in, and then hoping that the scenes with effects sort of trickles down to the scenes without effects, so that people looking at the cut can appreciate that that unfinished scene will be great. And so for us, it was a lengthy process. The producers were super generous with our, like, editorial just kind of went on longer than it maybe had planned to, because we were still refining. But we just found that the ending, like in particular the third act, it just wasn't as strong as the first hour. And there were many reasons for that. The story wasn't quite working right. The sets, like, there's a lot of things that just weren't quite as good. The first hour felt really good and tight and beautiful, and then it kind of just started to fall apart in the end. So many months of debate, discussion, rewriting, rebudgeting, arguing, laughing, crying. I drank so much coffee at that time in my life. I was giving myself like heart palpitations, and I had to ease off the coffee.
Oh
Literally
my.
went to the ER and was like, I'm having a heart attack. And they're like, have you been stressed out? And I'm like, I'm in post production on a movie, and I think we're chopping off the entire end. And they're like, okay. And I'm like, yeah, because my heart is doing this funny squiggle on the screen. It was just coffee, like stress and coffee. So a lot of hard nights and days to get to the point where you're like, I think we need a new ending, and then figuring that out with the producers. And I don't really want to say convincing them to do it, because I feel like they also wanted to do it, but it was convincing them of what the new ending would be, what
Hmm.
it would cost, what it achieves. Can we go back and put the team together and go all the way back and shoot for a couple weeks and create a new ending? And while we're there, can we get this little insert we never,
Yeah.
can we do? So it became this huge conversation, and they did it. They said yes, and all of a sudden, gosh, the movie took a long time to make because of this. So, like, maybe a year after we wrapped, I was going back, and the team was coming
Wow.
back, and it's not a short journey. It's LA to Johannesburg, is about as far away as you can get on the planet before you start coming back around. And we went back out there. We had a really quick prep, and we shot 2 weeks, and we changed the whole movie. So it was, I realized it was an opportunity not just to change the ending, but to bookend it and do all these things. So the opening sequence of the movie is something we shot later. That was a reshoot as well. So this
Hmm.
big opening sequence with, the beginning of the attack right before he loses his memory. And we decided to be ambitious with our reshoots. So that was the first day of reshooting. It was like, let's get the hundreds of extras and go to that town and keep that on day one. And I remember Lee flew back in day before, I guess, showed up, got back in his costume, great spirits. and there was hundreds of people on set, and we're shooting this giant sequence, and he's like, "Oh, we're really jumping right into it." And I was like, "Yeah." And I think we all felt that way. And he was great. It's a lot of hard work for an actor to be in this kind of messy, dirty machine gun movie.
Yeah.
So yeah, so the process is long, complicated, tiresome, stressful, especially because of the uncertainty. So I'm talking to you with the hindsight of the movie
Yeah.
done, it's out, and I've moved on. But in the midst of that, while I was drinking too much coffee and having heart palpitations, was the question of, are we going to finish this movie? Is the ending like, what if they don't want to spend another dollar? Do we finish that version? Does that suck? Or is it okay? Or do we not finish this movie? Like, movies just get disappeared sometimes. And all of that was on the table, and it was extremely stressful. I don't know if people talk about this aspect of filmmaking enough. It's
Yeah.
not always, there's many romantic and thrilling and exciting parts. There's also really a lot of heartache and sometimes literal heartache or stress,
Hmm.
because we care. You're the filmmaker. You want this to be the best. And I wasn't trying to make what we call a Sundance movie or a small indie drama that was like, it wasn't trying to be this little heartfelt gem. We were trying to make a big, exciting movie, but nonetheless, I care 100%. I'm a genre guy. I want it to be the coolest, most fun. And so when it starts breaking or something's not working or there's a problem, you can't help it affects you, and you can't detach yourself from that.
Yeah, 100%. No, I'm glad you're. Yeah, I feel like that's more accurate to the. Yeah, I
To what you've
wish. No,
experienced.
I wish more filmmakers were open about talking about that side of it for sure.
Yeah.
So thanks for yeah, letting.
Yeah.
All right, okay. I want to. Our schedule is tight here, so I want to see
Okay.
what we can do about.
Okay.
I don't want. These aren't rapid fire. I'm being an AD over here and just reminding us of time. Okay. This is something that directors often don't talk about much, and I'm curious, and because this is an aspect of a world that I occupy too.
Mm.
It feels kind of random, just come out of nowhere. But
All good. Yeah. Hit me.
what do you in terms? I don't want to talk about casting your movie. I don't necessarily in terms of casting and crewing the film. I want to talk about a
Yeah.
specific position,
Hmm.
and it's called the script supervisor.
Yeah.
So I don't know what your experience is with script supervisors or how extensive you look into that specific person, but what do you look for in
Mm.
that position when you are making the narrative stuff?
That's a great question. We had an excellent script supervisor on Revolt, and for the life of me, right this very moment, I'm gonna have to look up her name because it breaks my heart that I can't remember it. Um, I look for someone who is a little bit ahead of me, because I'm shooting from something I wrote, but now I'm on set and I'm in the midst of
Hmm.
all of the chaos of it all, and so I'm really looking for someone who's like kind of got my back. Does that really answer your question? Like, it's kind of like, there's so many little things, whether it's eye lines or coverage, but I'm really looking for a therapist. I mean, that's a script supervisor on set could be like a therapist. I drive me crazy. I have to look up.
Are you going through IMDb right now too,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
something?
yeah.
I
There's
was
some
gonna look
people's
it up for
names
you
that
while
I
you.
can never remember, and I have to do this whole time. It's really embarrassing.
Was
Um,
she local, or what did she go
yeah,
out
yeah,
from?
yeah. Most of our crew was local, and I don't know. This is a really great part of your podcast, isn't it?
I'm going. All right, I'll burn some time with. All right,
Yeah.
yeah. So I agree. I've definitely since moving to LA, I've been script supervising has been my bread and butter. So
Yeah.
I think I've told you before too. Like I've been on many sets, worked with many directors, either making their first feature, making their first short, making their second short, whatever. There's always enough going on in your brain where having that backup,
Is
having
there?
that having that backup of like, oh, this person has my back on story, because most crew members, like the DP is looking at the visual, the lighting, the composition, the sound person is listening at the audio, everybody's got their thing. There's Unless you have a producer on set that's like a creative producer looking at story, there's normally nobody else actually watching to make sure this is a cohesive thing it's going to cut together.
Right.
So um,
For me, okay. Maureen Conway, that's her name.
lovely, Maureen.
Maureen Conway was my emotional rock during many hard days. And I'll tell you, one of the things I like about a script supervisor is that if I'm by the monitor, they're right next to me and they know everything that's going on, and I can turn to them and say, is that person being mean to me or am I crazy? And they'll say, you're doing fine. Oh, thank you. So, so on a hard movie, Revolt was a hard movie. It's a physically hard movie. It's everything.
Yeah, yeah,
Script supervisor is an emotional therapist, not just for the sake of the director's sanity, but for the story. Like, oh, are we? So it's almost like a little. To me, sometimes it could be a little story consultant on the side. You can like, hey, I got that line in a close up, but we're running out of time. I don't think I can get another one. How was that take? Let's look at it. But what do you think? Just having that consultant, so it's not just a mechanical job.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess like maybe moving forward with your future projects, I don't know, because it's interesting interviewing with directors as a script supervisor. Sometimes like the job is to just let you know that I'm here to have your back, and this
Yeah.
is my experience and whatever. But yeah, okay, I'll leave it at that. Great.
I worked as an editor for many years, so
Yes.
I'm usually not too worried about whether it'll cut together. Usually I can do that in my head on the day, or if it's storyboarded, I kind of have a sense of like what's going to cut usually. Eye lines a little trickier. It's always good to have as much help as possible with eye lines, because then you can just be a little weird at times. Yeah, so for me, it's really more about big picture. How are
Yeah.
we doing? How are we? Because sometimes you don't really need to cover a scene with a lot of angles. In that case, you're not leaning super hard on your script supervisor. Then there were days in Revolt where we had tons of pages of dialogue in multiple languages. That's certainly the kind of day where you really lean on your scripty, because I don't speak other languages. I barely can speak English sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like, did we get
Yeah,
that? I mean,
yeah, and they
which
were
language is that in?
okay, and they were multilingual in terms of being able to cover that, or
I don't
how does
remember. I
that?
don't know. I don't remember that Maureen was. We had like a translator as well, so I feel like maybe they were sitting together that day. But
Okay.
there were 2 days really. But yeah, it's an interesting job. It's not something that's discussed often enough. How much we actually rely on a script supervisor.
Great.
It's also freedom. It means especially if you're having a more improvisational day. An action scene might be a bit more planned out, but if you're shooting, a bit more on the fly that day, you're kind of covering some dialogue and you're working with the actors and kind of finding it organically. That's when you really need that person in your
Yeah.
corner who's going to make sure you're
No,
doing it
for
right.
sure. I mean, I think about the days of as a director, you want to be in it, and you want to be focused with your cast, and you you gotta do all the blocking, you gotta figure everything out. And sometimes
Yeah.
it had been a bit since you've looked at the script. I mean, like wrote the script, or it's not fully fresh in there, and you're not picking up the sides to review like you're.
Well, I'm always reviewing my sites. I disagree. I'm always. I have a friend who's a photographer who's been on many of my sets over the years, and he used to tease me because he always took pictures of me on set, and I was always just looking at a clipboard
Mhm.
because I'm always looking at the pages. There's always time. There's always, you're rushing, and then you're waiting on something. Maybe this or that. I don't want
Okay.
to criticize any department. Everyone always says you're waiting on lighting, but it's not always lighting. Sometimes you're waiting on something else, but you're waiting, and there's just another chance to look at that material again. And it's funny. It doesn't matter how long if you wrote the script or how long you've been with the material, but there's something about reading that page that morning. It's like, it feels like a whole different thing. I mean,
Yeah.
hopefully it doesn't feel like an alien project. Hopefully it's familiar to you. But there's something about reading it that morning and going, oh, we have 4 hours to shoot this. I've thought about this scene for X number of years.
Hmm.
And today we have 4 hours to shoot it. And we'll probably never get a chance to shoot it again. Granted, sometimes you do, but you really want to nail it. And all of a sudden it reads differently because you're bringing more of an energy and an intensity to it. And the stakes
Yeah.
are, every other time you read it, there were no stakes. You're just reading it. Now you're like, today we do based on this page is going to be in the movie forever.
Okay. Well, I'm
So
happy to.
it changes.
I'm happy to hear that you're reviewing on in the morning. That's great. I love it. I'm all too familiar with directors not doing that, and I have to come up and be like, hey, remember this thing happens and this thing happens. And I kind of go through the sides with them sometimes. And I'm like, do you know what you're filming here today?
Wow. Wow. Yeah.
It's yeah.
I'm so sorry for you. Yeah.
But that's
I skipped that movie.
and sometimes they turn out great.
Well, I mean, look, yeah, there are people who dwell in chaos and make great films. Big, fabulous directors who just live in a crazy, crazy way and work in a crazy way. If the films are good, then it works. So
Okay.
there's no, not only is there not one way to do this, but there's like infinite ways of doing this. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just there's too many variables and personalities. It's just whoever, who and whatever, you know. If the people like the movie, every movie's been made in a slightly different way, you know, every
Yeah.
single one. So
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Next question.
yeah.
How do you feel about the 12-hour workday? Being that that's the standard day length for feature. What's your take on
You know, I'm glad this has been coming up a lot, and that you know, I'm glad we averted a strike last year, but I'm glad that the discussion was happening, and that it's not just happening in the film business, right? It's happening everywhere. I mean, there's
mhm.
strikes going on at food plants and all that. So I'm glad we're having the conversation. I think that the 12-hour workday is
So I
well,
guess let me interject really quick.
yeah,
Just to
yeah.
clarify, do you also uh, help produce the features that you're directing, or you strictly
I
director?
have not. I have produced really small films a while back. I have not. I did not. I was not technically a producer on Revolt. I'm not technically a producer on this film. So in that sense, it's outside of my
Hmm.
purview. But as the director, you're still very much involved in all of this. Um, I do everything I can to fight for the shortest days and 5-day weeks. And in some ways, for me, I think the 5-day week is a more important distinction even than the 12-hour day, because it really depends on how many locals you have and are they driving back home and is that safe, and or do 12-hour days really, are they 12-hour days, or they grow, and if every day is a 16-hour day, it's a ridiculous prospect. I don't think I ever on Revolt, I can't think of any day that we went over at all. And if we did, it was maybe a half an hour. I mean, and part of that was just the reality of it is that it was a very hard film to make. So you have to move on. And also we were always going to different locations because when you do a road movie. So with that film, I don't think we probably almost always had a 12-hour day, which means for unit, it was even longer days. And I know that was extremely hard on them. But what made Revolt so hard is that being a small movie, I think almost every week ended up being a 6-day week.
Hmm.
And when you combine a longer day and then a week like that, you're just burning everybody out, and it's horrible. So I've done a lot to push for 5-day weeks, and working on a new film now, and we're still at 5-day weeks in our schedule, and I think that helps a lot. I don't know. I actually, honestly, I really envy the old film schedules. If you look at a film schedule or just the interview with people talking about how films were shot and the pace at which films were shot not that long ago, 12-hour days were a rarity. And there were some, absolutely, there were movies that were brutal, but the expectation of what you're supposed to achieve in camera on a given day was so much different than it is now.
Hmm.
And I think part of that is because of our technology, not just digital movie cameras, but our technology as a whole, right? Like the fact that you know, in the 80s, you couldn't mass email a call sheet. So you had to like, everything had to be handed out. And I think the speed of life and business was a little bit slower. And maybe therefore the expectations of what a crew could achieve in one day was just different. And now everyone wants everything right away. And so it's expected that a crew in a 10 or 12 or 16-hour day is shooting like a bazillion pages and making it all beautiful. And I think that's on the one hand, it's fair in the sense that, well, we have more productivity tools, we have an internet, we have all this stuff that makes life faster. So I guess we should be a bit more productive. But on the other hand, at what point are we just being cruel to ourselves, to the crew, and making crappier movies because we're blazing through them, and in
Yeah.
3 weeks, I don't know.
Yeah.
So I'm all over the place about it. There's not much I can do about it personally. It's my whole struggle is getting the next film made, and the hours of the day is not something I have a lot of say over, quite frankly.
Yeah, yeah. No, I feel like okay, because I feel like the director is a position that does have power. If anything, I mean, 'cause I think about like let's just say, well, maybe
Yeah,
okay. I know I've been on movies that we
yeah,
have done so well. And we've wrapped early, multiple days. We've gotten additional scenes from like the next day to make the next day lighter. Like
yeah,
we've done
yeah.
stuff like that, and I
Sure.
have seen producers fire back with like, "You guys are doing so good. We're chopping a day off the schedule."
And you're like, wait a minute.
Yeah, it's like, well, I
How?
thought,
Why are you punishing me for being a good boy? Yeah, it's not that directors do it on power. It's that a director is unfortunately in the position of director. You have conflicting incentives. Like as the director, you're sort of incentivized for super long days because theoretically you're shooting more material. Good for you. You're exhausted, but at the end of the day, you get driven back to a hotel or a home and then you rest, whereas the unit or other crew are still working. And so it's like, so on the one hand, I'm like incentivized to wring every second out of the movie and every second out of the crew. And I'm encouraged to do the most creative and the most cover the scene in the best way. On the other hand, I'm disincentivized to it because it wears me down, it wears the crew down. It doesn't necessarily mean better results. It's just more hours and more stuff, but it's just crammed in. But I'm only embarking now on my second film, so I do have power over certain things, but it's not a final authority. It's not saying no. We're shooting. I want to do 8-hour workdays and 5-day weeks, and therefore we're going to shoot this movie for 10 weeks. Well, it's just not agreeable. Like I don't know what producer is going to agree to make a small film and shoot it for twice as long because we want shorter days. So sure, a director has power, but my incentive is to make the best movie possible
yeah, yeah,
within the resources, and I get penalized in a way. But if we go over, at the end of every day, a report is filed. So it's like they went over on Monday. Okay, they went over on Tuesday. Okay, is there a problem? They went over on Wednesday. Okay, if they're over by Friday, I might be getting fired. So I'm in. But if they say, oh, but we're doing 12-hour days or we're doing this many hour days, well, I'll take every minute I can get because it's never enough days or weeks. So it's a really I don't know. It's a weird position to be in.
yeah. It
I,
is.
I just I just wish it wasn't the standard because now the expectation is you're going to shoot a bazillion hours of footage every day, and I've done that. I'm capable of doing that. It's not always the best answer. It's not always the
Yeah,
best material, as opposed to okay, today we're shooting this 3-page scene, and we're going to shoot half of it, break for lunch, shoot half of it, and everyone goes home for dinner. Like
yeah,
that would be nice.
yeah. You go in with a plan. You know the shots you want. You've prepped for the
Yeah,
movie. Everybody goes in, and we're getting these specific shots in this specific way, and we accomplish
yeah,
the task. And we go home. But sometimes it's like,
right.
well, we have more time. I guess let's shoot more. That yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Just
yeah. The one thing that helps is turnaround for actors, let's say. And on Revolt, I forget the numbers now, but let's say the actors had 10-hour turnaround. And that was from like the moment that was like at the end of a day, they're brought back to their place to stay. That's when the 10-hour clock begins. I think it was 10, but I don't remember. But let's say, and then they have 10 hours before we can take them away the next morning to go shoot again. And that helped us contain the days. It didn't necessarily help for unit because we were traveling. We had so many locations and they were always multiple units setting up and breaking down. And that was still brutal. But as our shooting days were actually somewhat contained because of turnaround. So sometimes turnaround can help everyone.
yeah, yeah, no, for sure. No, definitely. I feel bad that it's the actors that we rely on to like, well, the actors have to rest. And it's like, well, why
I know it's
don't
like
we
everyone
why
else has to rest too. Yes, I'm also exhausted. So is that dude over there, whose name you've never decided to learn, who's just holding that thing all day. But he's also tired and he has a family. Yeah, I know. There's a. It's weird, right? We're all very passionate about movies, and of course, the director hopefully is the most passionate one about
yeah.
it. It's their movie, whatever, or if it is their movie, I should say. In the sense that maybe they wrote it or maybe it's their project that they've carried for many years. So by the time the director's showing up, they've maybe been involved for a really long time. So they want to work as hard as possible and they're willing to lay it all on the line. But for much of the crew, it's a job. It's a day
Yeah.
job. And they might like the movie, they might like the crew, but it's not some career defining moment for them the way it might be for a director or an actor or some other people on the crew. A lot of the crew is working to pay their bills and do a great job. And it's not really appropriate to apply the, well, this is my career defining thing, so I'm going to work too hard until I'm physically exhausted. You apply that to a workforce, that a crew
Mhm.
that's trying to do their best. You're just taking advantage of them at that point. And that's
Yeah.
unfortunately kind of the norm across TV and film right now. And I don't know how it's going to change, but at least the conversations last year and the almost strike was, to me, seems like a beginning of the conversation, and
Mhm.
hopefully we can continue down that path.
Yeah, and I mean, it sounds like you're at least self-aware enough to understand that from your crew and your own team. So I'm sure
Yeah.
that that goes to work with you on how you
I,
treat
I,
your.
I fight for the most humane conditions across the board. Like the 5 hour day is a big one for me because the 6 hour days on Revolt seems so destructive. And so I fight for the 5 hour day. And as I grow as
The
a
5 day
filmmaker,
week.
I'm sorry,
The
a
five.
five
That's
hour
like
day would be fantastic. When it's like, I think they do that in France actually, in the 60s. They shoot for a few hours and hang out. Yes, 5 day weeks. I fight for those, and then my feeling is as I grow as a filmmaker and do gain more authority to say, here's how I want to make this film, and have more people respect that and go with that, I can continue to advocate for the most humane hours and days. That's the truth. And someone's making their first, second, or third movie. Yes, I'm in control of so much of that movie, but I also, there's a lot of things I don't quite have a say in, including
Mhm.
like what the budget is, which is a direct, relationship to the schedule.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it, my sir. Oh yeah, I guess okay. That's pretty much what I got, and that's
Hmm.
pretty much our time.
Okay.
So, I can throw in a little extra nugget here. I guess if you, yeah, I don't know.
Sure.
Um, this is, I feel like it's a lame question, but
Great. I love a lame question towards the
I'll
end.
throw
This
it
is great.
anywhere.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess I'm curious you like to tease via Instagram in terms of like what you're working on or something's in the works or here's
Oh
like
yeah.
a
Hmm.
thing. Um,
It's so nice to know someone's actually seeing that stuff.
yeah. So how
Somebody cares.
somebody cares.
Thank you, Eddie. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
Um, how do you feel about I don't know if it's like you can't talk about what you're working on or just
Mhm.
the Hollywood secrecy element of like how or is it
Sure.
something
Yeah.
or is it more for you that you don't want to
Uh-huh.
jinx something like there's a lot
It's
of
it's all
elements.
it's all those things. I am happy to answer that question. It's actually all of those things. First of all, I actually just prefer a little mystery. I'm old enough to remember before there was an internet, when your favorite filmmakers and rock stars only existed in TV and films and magazines, and you had to like go get that picture, go read that article, and otherwise they were mysterious, and it was I liked that. I don't love that now. Some really interesting artists are just on, say, Instagram, like posting a picture with their dog and they're like standing on the sidewalk and like a not great photo like that they took themselves. It just, to me, I know that they're human, but I wasn't really signing up for that. I was signing up for the cool, weird artist that you are, that you put out these weird things into the world, and now you're giving me the really ordinary stuff. And it loses a little magic to me, I guess, and it doesn't affect my appreciation of their work. It's just I'm not particularly. It feels very voyeuristic and almost paparazzi-esque. Like people are now paparazziing themselves all the
Hmm.
time. Really, really well-known artists are just like, here I am in the bathroom. It's like, why are you doing that? I don't know. So I don't really subscribe to that. Not that anyone really cares what I'm doing, but I just don't have a big urge to overly share the mundanity. I rather post the photo of the mundane thing that to me looked quite magical and strange and share that. As far as sharing what I'm working on, um, the last few years I've been writing, developing, and pitching a lot of things, and there's not a lot that's photogenic about that process. So
Yeah.
I haven't felt the need to overly share that. But it is also a little bit about jinxing things. And also, I never want to be someone who touts what I'm doing until I know it's happening. So I'm always like, okay, when I'm on set, I'll let you guys know this movie I'm making. But until then, here's a little picture of a half a page of a script or a diagram of a scene. But and then also this way, if the movie changes or something, it's not like I've laid it all out and bragged about something that didn't quite pan out. It just seems like a lot of people are always boasting. I'm not a boaster, but I'm proud of the things we're doing, and I can't wait to talk about them. But I feel like I'd rather have some substance behind it.
Okay. So I guess in general for as our outro, in terms of like following your journey and hearing and being excited about what you got cooking, what are you currently trying to challenge yourself with, and what are you hoping to accomplish here in we're at the very early stages of 2022? Like what's on your horizon here?
Yeah, I've got a new movie in the works, and I hope to be on set of that movie and posting about it, hopefully relatively soon. And other than that film, I have a couple other film projects that are in a more pitchable stage. So I have a few projects in development and hopefully an active project. So I hope to get them all up and running this year. It's only February now, so we'll see. But things take time, and
Yeah, yeah.
got to just keep hammering away and keep your head up high and hammer through. And then all of a sudden you realize,
No, for
you
sure.
you end up where you're going, but it takes a while.
Okay, yeah, because I think about the creative, the journey of thinking about what you made before, and like,
Yeah.
wow, everything you learn through that process, and trying to elevate yourself to the next thing in every potential way that's in your control.
Yeah.
So I'm just assuming that that's a part of your equation too. But
That, the things I've worked on in the past and how they,
no,
and what I've learned from them, or
just that you're like, you made Revolt, and you had that experience, the VFX, the genre, and like, I don't know if that probably plays into what's coming next, is like, or either if
sure.
it, yeah.
Yeah. The new things I'm working on are a bit different than Revolt, and hopefully better and hopefully more interesting and all that. What I've learned from it, if anything, I just feel like much more confident as a storyteller and a filmmaker, having been through Revolt. And there's lots of things I don't love about that movie, and there was lots of, I've hinted at some of the trials and tribulations of making it. I think of now, I feel like it's a dent in the armor. It's just part of who I am, and
Mhm,
I don't
mhm.
I don't think about that movie too much. But I'm
Yeah,
standing on, in a way, I stand on its shoulders and I climb up to the other ones. And so it's just about life experience. And also, I think what we've all learned in the last couple of years in the pandemic is to, like, I don't know, try to balance life a little bit. I guess one thing I'm trying to do this year is, got some big projects and some big things going on, but I'm trying to also just stay super centered and zen about it all. So on the days that there's really exciting developments, I try not to get too excited because I know that could change. And on the day there's setbacks, I try not to be too discouraged by that either. And then you just get through your week or your month or the project. And I'm just trying to be a little more centered through the whole step, because Revolt was, I think anyone's first film is quite a roller coaster emotionally and personally. And then that movie was especially
mhm.
challenging and ambitious. So it really was quite crazy. My own little apocalypse now or something. So now
Yeah,
I'm trying to take a more like wholesome approach, like as a person to it, and trying to,
yeah.
I meditate. I've reduced my caffeine consumption. I try to eat right, and just maybe the next film doesn't have to be so physically destructive.
Yeah, let's hope it's not.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that being said, I'm sure if people want to keep in the know and follow and see your hints and your teases, they can follow you on Instagram. I'm sure, just at your name, Joe Miale.
Yeah, my name on Twitter and Instagram. I don't post very often, and I don't post too many secrets, but
Yeah,
the more when I can, I will.
yeah. No, it's all very cool. It's always cool,
Yeah,
cool imagery and cool stuff. So I know I
thanks,
enjoy.
thanks. Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Cool. All right. With that being said, I guess that's it. Thanks.
All right.
Thanks for being a
Yeah, it was a
part.
pleasure. Yeah, thanks for having me.
And
Appreciate it.
all right. Cool. All right. Bye,
I
people.
bye. Thanks.